The kind of humid Thursday evening in the city when the air sticks to your skin, and people lose their tempers. Judge Simone Harris had just finished a long day presiding over a packed docket in municipal court, her mind still replaying the testimony from a particularly troubling case. Her judicial robes were neatly folded in the passenger seat of her sedan as she made her way home. She was wearing a plain navy dress. Simone was looking forward to nothing more than a quiet dinner and a few chapters of her favorite novel amid the bustling streets and rain-stained pavement. But in her rear-view mirror, she saw blue lights that were blinking as she turned onto Maple Avenue. She ignored it at first, thinking that the officers might be attending to an emergency. Simone's heart sank when the cruiser came up behind her, siren blaring once before going silent. She gave a signal, rolled down her window, and pulled over with both hands on the wheel, just as her father had instructed her to do years earlier. With their hands resting on their holsters, two officers stood rigidly as they approached. Leaning in, the lead officer, a tall, pale man with a shaved head and a scowling jaw, leaned in. He barked, license and registration, without bothering to say hello. Simone gave a calm nod as she nodded. Naturally, officer, my registration is in the glove box and my license is in my purse. Permit me to reach for them? The officer's eyes got smaller. Slowly, Simone followed through and moved with deliberate care. As the officer's partner, a younger man with a buzz cut and a nervous energy, peered into her vehicle with a flashlight and swept the seats, she handed over her documents. What is it that brings you to this area? The tone of the lead officer's question was accusatory. Simone gave an even response. I live here. Is there something wrong? The officer looked at his partner, while ignoring her inquiry. Get out of your vehicle. Simone paused, her thoughts racing. She was aware of her rights and the law more thoroughly than most, but she was also aware of how quickly things could get worse. Officer, may I inquire as to the reason for my stop? The jaw of the lead cop clenched. Step outside the car. Now. Simone stepped out with her hands visible, unbuckling her seatbelt. The younger officer approached her from behind in a ring. Move around. Hood in their hands. Simone gave in and felt the rough metal in her hands. As the officers patted her down, she heard the rustle of fabric and the snap of latex gloves. Do you carry any weapons? The chief officer demanded. Simone replied, No, sir, even though she was aware that her judicial ID was in her purse. What's in the vehicle? Just some groceries in my work bag. The officer sneered. What kind of work is it? Simone considered her options and hesitated. She had learned that if she revealed her position too soon, things could get worse and they might think she was trying to get ahead. She said quietly, I work for the city. With a loud, disbelieving laugh, the policeman laughed. Yes, correct. Performing what? I am a judge. The officer's skepticism grew as his eyes became narrower. Do you have any evidence of that? My credentials are in the front seat in my bag. After looking at his partner, the cop nodded. Remain here. Avoid moving. The younger officer moved to the passenger side, opened the door, and perused Simone's belongings before leaving. Simone, her heart racing, stood still. She was prepared for high-stress situations, but it was different when you were the victim. She reflected on her parents and the numerous black individuals who failed to return home from routine traffic stops. Her eyes narrowed as the lead cop went around her. Do you know that you have a sharp mouth? Think you're superior to us? Simone gave a head shake. No, sir. I simply want to return home. He drew nearer, his breath becoming bitterly hot. People of your caliber always had an attitude. Never assumed that the rules apply. Simone fired back in kind. She was aware of how quickly things could devolve. Simone's judicial ID was in the hands of the younger cop when he returned. His expression changed from one of suspicion to one of confusion as he gave it and Simone a quick glance. Sarge responds, you might want to look at this. As he examined the badge, the lead cop snatched the ID. Except for the distant hum of traffic, the street was silent for a brief moment. The officer's face got darker. Do you find this funny? Posing as an official badge? Simone fixedly and unflinchingly met his gaze. That is a genuine badge. My name is Judge Simone Harris. The officer's white knuckles around the ID made his jaw work. The younger officer made a nervous shift and looked at his partner. The lead cop glared at Simone and then at his partner. "Sarge, it looks legit." "Dial it in." After radioing in Simone's credentials, the younger officer retreated to the cruiser, the aggressive posture of the lead cop as he stood over Simone. "Do you believe that all it takes to get out of anything is to show a badge? That is not how things work." Simone remained silent as her patience wore thin. Cops who couldn't stand the idea of a black woman holding authority and saw every badge as a challenge to their own were something she had seen before. The dispatcher's voice confirmed Simone's identity and position as the radio crackled. The younger officer came back with a pale face. "She is genuine, Sarge. She is a jurist." Anger and shame mixed in the twisted expression on the lead cop's face. He returned Simone's identification to her. "You can travel." Simone held her hand steady as she took the badge. "Am I allowed to leave?" The policeman turned away and did not respond. Still having a racing heart, Simone got back in her car. She glanced in the rear-view mirror as she drove off to observe the two police officers arguing on the sidewalk. She was aware that this would not be over, not for her or anyone else who resembled her. She was going home, at least for tonight. In a fog of exhaustion and rage, Simone reenacted the encounter over and over in her mind the remainder of that night. Even though she had kept her hands visible, spoken calmly, and followed every instruction, she was still treated like a suspect, and her authority and humanity were questioned at every turn. She was aware that she had done everything right. She started writing the following morning at her kitchen table, with sunlight pouring in through the window. Every detail of her complaint to Internal Affairs was meticulously recorded, including the time, place, officers' names and badge numbers, the conversation, and how her judicial credentials had been dismissed as a joke. She sent the report to the Office of Professional Standards of the Police Department with a copy to the city's legal counsel and the presiding judge of her court, along with a copy of the dashcam footage that had captured the entire stop. She was aware of the dangers, such as retaliation, negative professional feedback, and the possibility that nothing would change, but she was also aware that remaining silent was complicity. Her phone rang after a short time. Chief Deputy Marquez, the head of Internal Affairs, was the culprit. He said in a formal but respectful tone, "Judge Harris, I want to assure you that we are taking this very seriously. We will begin a thorough investigation. Would you mind coming in and making a statement?" Simone agreed, and her resolve grew stronger. She answered questions, watched the video, and talked about how scared and humiliated she had been all afternoon at police headquarters. The investigators paid close attention, their expressions grave. One of them quietly admitted, "You're not the first to file a complaint about these officers. However, you are the first with this kind of evidence and authority," she said. The news media was unavoidably informed of the story. City Judge Files' complaint against police for racial profiling appeared in headlines by the following morning. Community leaders rallied in support of Simone after the mayor's office issued a statement promising a thorough investigation. The officer's suspension was requested by civil rights organizations, and the city council scheduled an emergency hearing on police accountability. Officer Turner and Sergeant Blake were placed on administrative leave while the investigation was conducted. Their union issued a statement in support of their actions, asserting that they had adhered to procedure and that the stop did not involve race. However, the dashcam footage presented a different narrative, and public opinion quickly became hostile toward them. Simone made an effort to remain focused on her work, but the scrutiny was never-ending. Journalists set up camp in front of her courthouse, activists wrote letters of support, and co-workers stopped her in the hallways to encourage her or, in some instances, to maintain an awkward silence. She found solace in her family, her mother, who brought her back to the generations of people who had fought for justice before her younger brother, who texted her memes to make her laugh, and her best friend, who brought over takeout and listened to her without making any assumptions. The evidence was overwhelming, and the investigation moved quickly. The officers' dismissive remarks about Simone's authority, their refusal to accept her credentials, and their aggressive tone were all captured on camera. Witnesses from the neighborhood came forward and described encounters with the same officers that were similar to this one. Simone was invited to testify at a public hearing held by the Oversight Board, which was given new authority by recent reforms. She spoke with conviction and clarity, and her words reverberated throughout the packed room. She stated, "This is not just about me. It's about every person who has been stopped, questioned, or made to feel bad because of their skin color. It is about the loss of trust that occurs whenever an officer misuses their authority. Additionally, it entails our collective obligation to demand better." The police chief announced that the case would be referred to the district attorney for possible criminal charges, and the board recommended disciplinary action. Simone was criticized by some for overreacting and using her position to settle a personal score, while others hailed her as a hero who represented perseverance and justice. Simone focused on the bigger picture, ignoring the noise. She collaborated with the city council to draft new policies regarding traffic stops, de-escalation, and officer training. She also met with community leaders and listened to their stories. She was determined to use her experience to make a difference, even though she was aware that real change would take time. The officer's case progressed through the system in the meantime. They attempted to portray Simone as an overzealous judge with a vendetta against the police, gave interviews defending her actions, and hired prominent attorneys. The public, on the other hand, was keeping an eye on the evidence. Simone began getting ready for the next chapter as soon as the day of the preliminary hearing arrived. She was aware that she would not be alone, that there would be retaliation, threats, an attempt to discredit her, and that it would not be easy. She was determined to participate in the city's transformation at any cost. On the morning of the officer's arraignment, the courthouse was abuzz with excitement. Protesters and supporters gathered on the steps, their voices echoing off the marble columns, while news vans lined the street. The atmosphere inside was nervous. With her head held high and her black robe draped over her arm, Simone showed up early. She was supposed to oversee a full docket that day, but everyone was talking about the officer's case. Even for her, the assignment had come as a surprise. Her heart skipped a beat when she saw the names Blake S. and Turner J. on her docket despite the court's random rotation system. In her chambers, she took a moment to steady herself and thought of her father's words. "Justice is blind, but you must never be." Simone entered the courtroom with the reserved authority that had become her signature when the bailiff called the proceedings to order. She sat down at the bench, and the room became silent. The prosecution defense stood up, and then the two officers, dressed in suits and with pale and drawn faces, entered. Their eyes lit up with surprise, disbelief, and then a flush of shame for a split second. Simone looked at them, but it was hard to read her expression. She even said, "Good morning, gentlemen," in her own voice. "We meet once more, though I suspect not in the manner you anticipated." The gallery was flooded with murmurs in a ripple pattern. Immediately, Simone was requested to recuse herself by the defense attorney, citing potential bias. The defense attorney is an experienced litigator known for his theatrical style. Simone responded, "This court is committed to impartiality," after listening patiently. "I had previously interacted with the defendants as a private citizen. I am fully capable of presiding fairly and have no personal stake in this case's outcome. The motion is denied unless the prosecution or defense can demonstrate actual bias." The law was clear, despite the defense attorney's stutter. The case would move forward. The charges of abuse of power, false arrest, and official misconduct were laid out by the prosecution, which was supported by dashcam footage, statements from witnesses, and a pattern of similar complaints. The defense attempted to argue that the stop was justified, that the officers had acted honestly, and that they had followed procedure. However, the evidence was conclusive. The officers' dismissive remarks about Simone's authority, their refusal to accept her credentials, and their aggressive tone were all evident in the video. Witnesses narrated similar encounters, portraying officers as untouchable because of their badges. Simone asked pointed questions, clarified the law, and made sure that both sides were heard as she listened to the testimony with the same calm focus she brought to each case. Reporters, activists, other judges, and, most importantly, members of the community who had come to see if justice would be served were all watching her. Simone hid in her room during a break, her thoughts racing. She was aware that the city as a whole and herself were at risk. She would be viewed as complicit if she was too lenient, If she were too harsh, she would be accused of vengeance. She recalled the mothers who thanked her for standing up, the young black girls who had written letters of support, and the elders who had advised her to keep fighting. Reminding herself that her duty was to the law, fairness, and the truth, she took courage from their words. The defense called the officers to the stand when the court resumed. Both men attempted to justify their actions by claiming that they were simply doing their jobs, and that they had no idea who Simone was. Their narratives, on the other hand, unraveled during cross-examination. The prosecution presented evidence of a pattern, including other citizens who had been treated with the same suspicion and contempt, other complaints, and other stops. As Simone prepared to rule on the preliminary motions, the courtroom was silent. She spoke clearly, and her voice reached every nook and cranny of the room. This court finds sufficient evidence to proceed with all charges to trial. Actions motivated by prejudice are not excused by the law, nor does it grant immunity to those who abuse their power. The badge is not a shield from accountability, but rather a sign of trust. The officers were led away with pale faces as the gavel fell. The gallery erupted in whispers, some expressing relief, others expressing rage. But everyone was aware that something extraordinary had just occurred. Simone took a moment to sit down and let the moment's weight settle. She was aware that the trial would be exhausting and that there would be a strong backlash, but she also knew that she had performed her duty. She saw a young woman in the gallery, her face bright with hope as she left the bench. Simone gave a soft promise with a smile that she would carry this out, not only for herself but also for all those who believed in justice. The trial of Sergeant Blake and Officer Turner became a major city event, garnering national attention and igniting debates about race, power, and law enforcement accountability. Activists, journalists, and everyday people filled the courthouse steps every day, some holding signs demanding justice, and others expressing support for the officers. Inside, the public and the media scrutinized every decision made by Judge Simone Harris with unwavering calm. Witnesses who described not only Simone's own encounter, but also a troubling pattern of stops and searches targeting black and brown residents were called by the prosecution to build a meticulous case. A department where certain individuals had long operated in violation of the law, confident that their badges would protect them from repercussions, was depicted in dashcam footage, emails from within the department, and testimony from fellow officers. The defense, on the other hand, attempted to cast doubt by claiming that the officers were being used as scapegoats for broader systemic issues, that the city's recent reforms were a witch hunt, and that Simone's position on the bench was itself a conflict of interest. However, Simone's rulings allowed the facts to speak for themselves because they were fair and precise. She reminded the jury that their responsibility was to evaluate the actions of two men who had, according to all evidence, abused their authority rather than punish the police as an institution. As the trial progressed, the city could almost feel the tension in the air. Every decision, every objection accepted or rejected, and every instruction to the jury weighed heavily on Simone. She was careful to remain impartial, refusing to be intimidated by the defense's tactics and never allowing her personal experience to cloud her judgment. Every young person who had ever been told they didn't belong, and every parent who had feared for their child's safety were watching her. She was aware. The final arguments were heated. The prosecution emphasized the need for accountability, the betrayal of trust, and the hope that justice might restore faith in the system. The defense warned of the dangers of overcorrection, good officers being fired due to political pressure, and a slippery slope. Simone told the jury to carefully weigh the evidence, ignore their feelings, and concentrate on the facts. The jury deliberated, and the city held its breath. The verdict was read, guilty on all counts, after 2 tense days. The courtroom burst into laughter, applause, and stunned silence. Simone remained composed as she thanked the jury for their service and reminded everyone that justice was about truth and accountability rather than vengeance. She gave Blake and Turner sentences that showed how serious their crimes were. They had to do community service, lose their badges, and spend time in county jail. But she also told them to go to restorative justice programs, meet the people they had hurt, and learn from them. She said from the bench, accountability is not just about punishment. It is about knowing how our actions affected others and working to fix the damage we've done. The trial had an impact on the city. New training, oversight, and community engagement programs were implemented as the police department's reforms were accelerated under the new leadership. The number of complaints about racial profiling went down, and officers and residents began slowly to rebuild their trust. Simone's story inspired others to speak up, demand better, and believe that justice was possible, and she became a symbol of hope and perseverance. She was praised for her bravery and honesty in letters from all over the country, including mothers and fathers, young law students, and retired judges. She continued her work on the bench, but she also started mentoring younger lawyers and judges. She shared her experience with them and encouraged them to lead with strength and compassion. Simone experienced a new sense of tranquility in her personal life. She made new friends, spent more time with her family, and allowed herself moments of happiness and relaxation. She was aware that the struggle for justice would never truly be won, and that there would always be new obstacles to overcome and battles to wage. But she also knew that she had changed things, that she had stood up for what was right, and that others would follow her lead and be inspired to do the same. The city held a community forum on justice and reconciliation on the anniversary of the verdict. Simone was given the opportunity to speak, and she felt a surge of pride and gratitude as she stood before the diverse, hopeful, and determined audience. She stated to them, "Justice is not a destination. It is a journey we take together, one step at a time, one case at a time, one day at a time. We must never lose hope, never give up fighting for what is right, and never forget that everyone is entitled to the law." As Simone looked out over the crowd, she saw not only the faces of the people she had helped, but also the promise of a city and a country moving, albeit slowly, toward a more just and equal future. The applause was thunderous,